August 8, 1963, 3:17 in the morning. A Royal Mail train cuts through the darkness of the English countryside. On board, 77 postal workers and 120 bags of used banknotes bound for destruction in London. What happens in the next 27 minutes will make headlines around the world. 15 men, one train, £2.6 million sterling, roughly $54 million in today's money. History calls it the heist of the century, but I've reviewed the evidence. I've run the numbers, and what I found isn't a legend. It's a case study in total operational collapse. To understand why this operation failed so completely, you first have to understand why it almost couldn't fail. Britain in 1963 ran on institutional trust. Cash moved across the country by rail with almost no expectation of interference. The high-value package carriage, known internally as the HVP, was not a secret. Postal workers knew it, train crews knew it, and as we'll document in this audit, the wrong people knew it too. The gang behind the Great Train Robbery wasn't a mob of desperate men. This was an organized crew. Over 20 individuals in total, 15 directly operational on the night. They had inside intelligence. They had a logistics plan. They had a safehouse. They even had a retired train driver on standby. What I'm going to walk you through today are the audit findings, the exact points at which this operation deviated from plan, and why those deviations were entirely predictable to anyone who knows how to read risk. Every audit starts with the information environment. What did the team know going in, and did they know the right things? Here's what they got right. The gang had a genuine insider, a postal worker who understood the scheduling of HVP carriages and crucially knew that in the summer of 1963 there would be an unusually large shipment. Post-holiday banking cycles meant the carriage would be carrying a volume far above its typical load. That's actionable intelligence. That's the kind of tip that separates a calculated operation from a reckless one. But intelligence is only as good as its depth. The gang knew the train's route. They knew the schedule. They knew roughly how much money would be on board. What they didn't fully account for was the train itself. Their plan required stopping the Glasgow to London mail train, the TPO, or travelling post office, at Bridego Railway Bridge in Buckinghamshire. To do this, they tampered with a trackside signal. They covered the green light and attached a battery to the red. The signal worked. The train stopped. At that stage, operationally, this was a textbook execution. The gap? What came next? They had a retired train driver named Peter Flashman, brought in specifically to move the train the short distance down the track to the bridge, where the bags could be unloaded more efficiently. Flashman couldn't do it. The locomotive was a newer model than he was trained on. He froze. The train never moved. In audit terms, this is a single point of failure risk that was never stress tested. The entire unloading plan depended on repositioning that train. There was no backup driver, no contingency if the primary asset failed to perform. They did not account for the fact that a man's skill set has an expiration date. It's 3:21 in the morning. The train has stopped. The driver, Jack Mills, has been overpowered. He'll later say he never fully recovered from the blow to his head that night. The gang forms a human chain and begins unloading 120 mailbags from the HVP carriage down the embankment, loaded into waiting vehicles. 27 minutes. Start to finish. By any operational metric, the robbery was fast and disciplined. And then they drove 30 miles and did nothing right for the next several weeks. The Safehouse was Leatherslade Farm, located roughly 30 miles from the crime scene in Buckinghamshire. The plan was to lay low for several days, let the initial police search radius contract, and then disperse. In risk management, we call the period immediately after an event the critical exposure window. It's the period of maximum scrutiny, maximum law enforcement activity, and minimum margin for error. The gang chose to sit inside that window, at a property less than an hour's drive from the scene of the crime. And then they made it worse. They played Monopoly. A group of men who had just stolen £2.6 million spent their downtime playing a board game about accumulating fake money, and in doing so, left their fingerprints on the board. When police raided Leatherslade Farm 15 days after the robbery, they found the Monopoly set. They found fingerprints on the board, on the pieces, on the kitchen surfaces, on the vehicles. The gang had been instructed to clean the farmhouse before leaving. They either didn't complete the job or left too late. From a forensic audit perspective, this is a documentation failure of the highest order. In financial auditing, one of the most common errors we see in fraud cases is that perpetrators focus all their energy on executing the fraud and zero energy on evidence management after the fact. The exit leaves a trail, and it's almost always the trail, not the transaction, that gets you caught. 11 of the 15 core gang members were eventually arrested and convicted. Sentences ranged up to 30 years. Brian Field, who had provided the inside intelligence, received 25 years. The mastermind, Bruce Reynolds, spent 5 years on the run before being caught in 1968. They executed a near-perfect crime. Then they left a paper trail on a Monopoly board. Now let's talk about the money itself, as it tells a story of failure beyond the heist. £2.6 million in used banknotes. In 1963 terms, that's generational wealth. In today's terms, over $54 million. To move any meaningful portion of it, they had to turn to the criminal underworld. And the underworld charges a premium for that kind of service. The going rate? Approximately 30% of face value to handlers willing to launder or move the notes. Some reports suggest even higher cuts in certain cases. In investment terms, they took a 30% haircut on day one, before accounting for legal fees, the cost of remaining hidden, or the years of their lives spent in prison. Of the £2.6 million taken, only about £400,000 was ever recovered by police. The rest, dispersed, laundered at a loss, spent in hiding, or simply never found. The greatest heist in British history generated a return on risk that most auditors would classify as catastrophically negative. The gang planned the robbery in detail but never built an exit strategy. They hid at a rural farm, divided the money, and waited for the investigation to cool down. But success created its own problem. Too many people knew, too much cash had to be moved. And the sudden appearance of wealth drew attention fast. Within weeks, investigators began tracing suspects through spending patterns, informants, and simple human error. The robbery was flawless. The exit strategy wasn't. So what is the final verdict on the Great Train Robbery? As a heist, it was extraordinary. The logistics, the coordination, the audacity are genuinely remarkable for 1963 or any other era. As an operation, it was a systematic failure at every stage that followed the initial execution. Finding 1. Intelligence was strong, but incomplete. A single point of failure in the train driver role was never stress-tested. Finding 2. The operational window was executed efficiently, but containment planning was non-existent. 30 miles from the crime scene is not a safe house. It's a liability. Finding 3. Forensic vulnerability was catastrophic. Evidence management was treated as an afterthought, and fingerprints on a Monopoly board ended careers and freedom. Finding 4. Asset management failed before the money could be counted. Cash without a laundering pathway isn't wealth. It's evidence. Finding 5. There was no exit strategy worthy of the name. The gang planned the robbery and assumed success would take care of itself. It never does. This is the lesson that every auditor, every risk manager, every business operator knows in their bones. It is not enough to execute the plan. You have to control what happens after the plan ends. 15 men, £2.6 million, $54 million in today's money, most of them caught, most of the money gone, one driver who never fully recovered, and a Monopoly board sitting in a police evidence room that closed the case. History remembers the headline, the audit of history remembers the numbers. Case file 001 closed. Every case file tells the same story, in a different disguise. Someone had a plan. someone had the money, and somewhere along the way, the audit found the gap. Next time on the Audit of History, we'll be doing a deep dive on why the Roanoke Lost Colony actually went bankrupt.